What's up, Mortal Kombat fans?
Hey everyone, how we doing?
You know, I say that every single time.
Yeah.
It's like the same thing. Hello, Mortal Kombat fan. My name is Nathaniel Christopher Blaustone Faust.
And I'm Zachary Ryan Blaustone.
Yes, we are brothers, but I have a new last name because I recently was married.
You were. Congratulations, Nathaniel.
Thank you. It's, I think, week 3 now. I'm broke.
She took everything.
No, I'm just kidding. Thank you for being here. If this is your first time here at the Mortal Kombat podcast, we are a podcast that mainly talks about
religious trauma.
And traumas of all sorts. What is that? Like childhood trauma, parental trauma, spousal trauma. All of that gets incorporated into this podcast. We bring in comedy. We talk about politics sometimes, but that is not the focus here on this podcast.
No.
The focus is
Religious trauma, baby.
as authentic and honest as we can be.
Yeah.
Talking about why do we talk about religious trauma in our podcast?
Well, we grew up in a hyper-evangelical Calvary Chapel church with a father as a pastor.
Yeah.
And we have quite a bit of trauma, and it's helped us heal. And we made a podcast to help other people heal talking about it.
Yeah, hopefully that helps them heal. I mean, that is not...
it's not Jesus complex is not in there.
Yeah, we are always trying to butcher the Jesus complex as much as possible.
Indeed.
But we are learning in our podcast that we are finally starting to make some real strides in a bigger community, and we've been having some wonderful interviews. Christianity is the trauma that we had in our lives growing up in that. Not everyone makes it out alive.
Nope.
But some of us have. Actually, I think a lot of us have.
Yeah.
And then this idea of making it out of a radical religious family or radical religious church. The question is, are you thriving after that? And in studio today, we have a very special guest. You might have known him from a couple episodes ago. We interviewed him on his story. And they are with us today, a little bit different of a podcast, to be sharing their perspective, their experience, and their practice as a therapist in working with people on religious trauma, radical upbringings. And so this will be our first official podcast with a therapist. So I would like to give a really, really warm welcome to IFS, or Internal Family Systems Specialist and Religious Trauma Therapist, Forest Benedict.
Hey, thank you. It's so good to be here.
Thanks for being here.
Yeah.
Welcome back. Well, not in studio, but
Yeah. No, it's definitely different being here in person. It's awesome.
Oh, I can imagine.
It's surreal, actually.
How's it feel right now being here?
It's amazing. You know, like I felt like our first interview I felt such a connection with you guys, and even rewatching it felt like I was here in a sense, but
Right.
it still feels so different being here in person. It's just,
And technically
it's
you
great.
were, and I was telling you that earlier, right? Like you were in the same spot you are now, but you were a laptop.
yeah,
And your head was like on a screen.
Yeah. But I just didn't get to look right at you guys like this. It's cool.
Yeah.
It's really special.
Being in studio too, and we're on the 10th floor of a really nice building right now
In San Francisco.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so
My legs are sore. Yeah. Just coming up those stairs.
We don't have an elevator.
the elevator
sadly.
broke.
Yeah. That was really rough.
No, we're in the garage. We have Pelotons to the left and a workout zone. This is the healing energy in here.
Yeah.
But yeah, thank you for coming in studio. And you drove how long did you drive to get here?
Yeah. It was about 2.5 hours. Yeah.
That's amazing.
Just did a therapy retreat
Yeah.
in Aptos area at the beach and the
cool.
redwoods and
Right, like Santa Cruz.
just awesome. Yeah. And it's, it's interesting because all my clients are online in California and I live in Washington. So it was like the first time I'd ever seen these guys in person.
Oh, wow.
And that they had ever seen each other in person. So
Wow.
it was amazing, just to be out there in the wilderness and hug and just have this bonding experience.
Oh, that sounds amazing.
Really awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, just to give a little background, you grew up in this area.
Yeah.
You're from the same county that this podcast is being produced in and being, accomplished. The same county that our father is a pastor in still, and a lot of the pastors that we were following, right, in the different Calvary Chapel churches, just like our last guest, Julia Myers, also was growing up in this county.
Yep.
But now you live in Washington.
Yeah.
But you're a practice, licensed therapist here in California.
Yeah.
Do you have patients in Washington as well?
No, I still haven't pursued getting licensed there.
California is shitty enough. They got plenty of work here. You can just
Well, yeah. And that's the thing. I had all my clients were here anyways, and I know California so well. And I just honestly didn't want to take a test. Like,
I don't blame you.
Well, you already have the California license.
Yeah,
right?
and that's a much harder test than the Washington one.
Yeah.
But I was just like, for now, this works. I'll just, market and advertise in California, and it's worked out, honestly.
Yeah.
So what is your like, I guess like the, how you put your name, like Forest Benedict, comma, letters.
Yeah,
What is your titles?
It's LMFT. So
licensed marriage family therapist.
Yeah, exactly. And for a while I had SATP. I mean, I still technically have that, but that's sexual addiction treatment provider, because that was what I was doing prior to the religious trauma work, was sex addiction. So that was, I keep it on there still, but I'm really not like pursuing, treatment of sex addiction like I was before.
And that was after you left the church and started your practice, or during while you were in the church?
While I was in the church, like I pursued that sexual addiction certification from a Christian perspective. And then I went on to like actually teach in that program and train sex addiction therapists and pastors
as a Christian.
Dun,
dun, dun.
At a Christian university.
Dun, dun.
Yeah. So I was fully in it. And,
yeah, wow.
And that's the thing, like when you're doing sex addiction work, you're always full, because you always have a lot of these, and this is just, I know this is a tangent from our planned topic,
sex.
But hey, it's fun. But yeah, that's the thing, is you get all these Christians who aren't actually sex addicts, but they have all this guilt around watching porn. And so you're always full of business, because all these churches are keeping everyone feeling like shit because of their behavior. So it's just such a different thing to move on, and honestly a big healing and step into authenticity for me, to move away from that into doing internal family systems work, trauma work, and work on religious trauma and sexual shame. Like to me, that was such a move in alignment with myself as I grew and healed and got out of the church. Wow. So that's felt very personally meaningful to me. And I love, instead of helping people like fight their urge to watch porn, it's like, let's heal the shame around watching porn.
See what happens.
Yeah. And not that people can't have an unhealthy relationship with sexuality, but I mean, I just love helping people be free and just accept themselves and learn about their desires. And yeah, I no longer want to partake in like helping people fight themselves. That just feels so wrong to me now.
Right.
Yeah. And I went through all that shit, and I don't want to do that to myself, and I don't want other people to do that.
Right. Yeah. And as, like I said, if you want to go back and listen to Forrest's personal interview where he shares a lot of his trauma and a lot of his healing journey, you've healed a lot of these parts of you that
totally.
Like in the church, like you're saying.
Yeah.
I grew up thinking I was an absolute porn addict and a sex addict.
We all did.
Before I even had sex, I was a sex addict,
Yeah. Yeah.
I think I cheated on over 10,000 different people's wives and whatever just by looking at them.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, yeah. So that was like an insane amount of shame around sex.
Totally. Yeah.
So it's just interesting to me that you were like a sex therapist, and then you went through that radical shift out of the church, and you were like, now I got to go back to the same people and tell them they're okay. I got to be a sex therapist and tell them it's fine.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. It's been such a, I don't know, the technical term would be like a mind fuck.
Right. It's exactly right.
Like serious, to go from one, really, like you're really certain everything about the world and how it works and sexuality and as a professional even, to going through this whole evolution personally, and then realizing like, wow, the world is so different. People are so different. And actually, it was interesting. I was talking to the guys in my retreat last night. We were at dinner, and I was telling them like, it's such a special thing, honestly, that I have the clients that I do in that group specifically, because it is a sex addiction group, but it feels like it's guys that kind of like accepted that I was evolving and decided they wanted to still work with me. And, I still respect if they don't want to watch porn, if they want to work on that. Like I support them, but I also support them if they want to work through shame. And it's just, I don't know, there's something like really meaningful about, just being able to evolve and change drastically as a therapist and a person. And then just trusting the process and seeing how new people come, and some people stay if they're evolving too. And that's been kind of beautiful to just see who comes along, who I get to work with.
Wow.
As I've changed.
Yeah.
Instead of being like, as a sex addiction therapist, I thought I had to be like, this famous author and impress everybody.
Yeah.
And now I'm just like myself and know how to help people deeply. And it's really meaningful, honestly, to help people from that place.
Yeah. That's really cool. It's like
Yeah.
it's like ego death. Your ego's being disintegrated over time.
Yeah.
But what's left is just that same, like we don't, what I've always said is we don't change much, but we grow immensely.
Yeah.
It's the same trunk, the same trees, different leaves, new branches, you're cutting things off, but you're ultimately the same core.
Yeah.
And I think that that's that authentic self, which let's make a lateral jump into so as a Christian therapist, as like mainly a Christian sex therapist, and I know in your personal episode, you talked a lot about the book you had written in the past for the church. We talked about covenant eyes. If anyone's ever heard of covenant eyes, we were like brutally raised under that. And you wrote a paper for covenant eyes. Like you have a history that's embedded in that.
That's connected. Yeah.
And so then as a Christian therapist, you're still a therapist and is now like considered a secular therapist, if you will.
Totally. Secular.
Yeah.
Don't say that word.
Seriously.
With a direct focus, like your practice, right, is about internal family systems or IFS therapy, which is still pretty brand new to me, like in the last 6 months. How did you get into that? How did you start this practice?
Yeah. Well, I know I mentioned like some of my own journey with psychedelics, and that kind of opened me up to realizing, wow, there's a lot of parts inside of me, a lot of pain inside of me that also that was unhealed. And that's the thing, is I knew about IFS and I liked it a lot, but not to the degree that I actually pursued it, And so I think I knew enough about it that like it was like my own heart and my own psyche like kind of like reminded me of it and let me know that was like my path to healing. And so I really deeply realized that through some of those experiences, and just felt this like really strong commitment to like, it felt like I was like a firefighter and I was going into like a burning building, and I was like so committed to going in and finding all the parts of me that were in pain and like healing them all. And I was so committed to that. And so what's interesting, I got into IFS training like almost immediately after that. I left Christianity, I got into the training, and then I started training in it and started helping my clients in that way. But then I started doing a ton of my own IFS therapy with a practitioner. And honestly, I found that to be incredibly life-changing and incredibly just so powerful. It's not like normal talk therapy. It's not just sitting here from an intellectual level trying to, like psychoanalyze your past or try and come to some like cognitive awareness of like, trying to make some peace with it from a cognitive place, but it helps you get so deeply into your own heart, and safely into the places that are in pain still. And I just, it was, to me, like I see those as like kind of returning to like my inner child or like myself at younger ages. And it just became so powerfully meaningful to like go back, as an adult to like my younger self who's like kind of in these traumatic experiences, and give him the experience he needed to like heal from that experience, and then like saving him, take him out of there, helping him feel safe again. And it has this effect on the body and the mind. Like it actually kind of releases that part of you from being kind of like stuck in the past inside of you. And then it like frees you up to not orient your entire life around avoiding pain. When you heal the pain, all the stuff you do, which is honestly for most people, it's most of the things they do are either to prevent pain or to react to pain when it's activated in them. So that's kind of like almost a basic way of explaining some of how IFS works. But the more of the pain and the trauma you can heal, the freer you become. And you're not driven by all these things that you have to do to avoid the pain. And so I went through that process personally, so much so. And that's how I, healed my fear of hell, healed a part of me that was like self-policing my every thought, sexual thought. I connected with my sexuality and realized, holy shit, like this is like a beautiful, beautiful thing. Like healed shame around sexuality. Like this is part of the beauty of IFS is it helps you realize how amazing it is inside of you. Like we're taught like it's bad inside of you and like you're a sinner and you're just broken.
Right.
But like through IFS, you like see like the whole amazing like universe inside of you. And you get to connect with that. And then you get to like out of that connection and healing, you like really know who you are at the deepest level. And then you can like be that on the outside. It's just really profound. Yeah. So I've been through that experience.
Sounds great.
Yeah, it's awesome. It's life-changing, and that's why honestly it feels like kind of sacred. I know that's a religious term, but it does feel sacred.
Right.
Like when a client trusts me to guide them to go to the depths that we need to go to heal. And I don't heal them, I help them heal themselves.
Right.
And that's
you're like a
amazing
guide.
too. I am a guide, and I can like teach them and show them how to heal themselves, which is profound.
Yeah.
Like, and that just is, like I said, it feels like sacred ground, because it's like a lot of them don't even know what is inside,
Right.
And they're trusting me to guide them to places that, every amount of energy they could muster up to put into it, they've put into avoiding that place inside of them.
Wow.
And then they're gonna trust me, and we're gonna do it very safely. But we're gonna go in and find those parts that are in pain and heal them.
And those parts, I like how, just to kind of like put everything you said so internal family systems are like, if the way I like to look at it, and what you're saying is like they're actual like other people, or if you are other entities inside of us that maybe were embedded at different traumatic times in our life, maybe, or like, so you talk about like an inner child. And so it feels like to me, this idea is like you have these different ages, maybe different genders, if you will, or like, I won't even say genders, but just like different sort of like energies, if you will.
Yeah.
And so this idea of like authentic self, is that authentic self like the parent that's kind of going to these?
Yeah. Those are really great questions. And it's like from an IFS perspective, it's like we all actually come into the world like multiple, like there's more than one, and it's not like multiple personality disorder, but it's like we have different parts of us that show up in different ways and maybe have different jobs, like different responsibilities to keep us alive and help us survive being human. And so those are like a natural, healthy part of us. But then where it gets problematic is when trauma happens. And then these parts of us take on like extreme roles and rigid roles. So like if, that's when it can become problematic. So it's not like we heal and then a part disappears, it's like this is basically a way of releasing the roles of parts when they're stuck in a job that kind of sucks and kind of makes our life harder and less fun. It's kind of like a way to release that job. And so it can still be part of us. Like it can still, it adds more life to us. It adds more, personality to us in different ways. But yeah, it can kind of be released of like a sucky job. Like if the job is like, say you're born into like a religious family and you start getting spanked, for like whatever, crappy, rules you're supposed to follow, they're religious rules, like, no cussing or no, all the stuff we were raised with, right?
Totally.
Right.
But you get spanked,
Right.
or like harshly treated. That at least this is what happened for me. I would say a part of me never wanted to feel that again. The pain of being shamed in that way and abused, which I would consider it abuse for sure. And so a part of me kind of took on this role of, I'm going to be perfect at all costs and obey everything,
Perfectionism is a part.
Oh,
It's a
totally.
huge part. Yeah.
And so much fear about making a mistake on any level, because it's this fear of getting spanked or actually more than that. It's like a fear of getting punished in some way in the present moment based on the past. But then it's also a fear of the pain of the past, of when that traumatic thing happened, of that pain getting activated also. So you can see, like, it can really set you on a course to, instead of like being yourself and feeling safe in the world and feeling like it's safe to be you, you get this part that's like, no, instead of that, we're going to orient your entire life around being perfect and obeying everything and never making mistakes. And then throw in probably this other part that I would say is really dominant when we come out of religion, a super harsh inner critic part. Because if you make any mistakes, then that one's going to come in.
Yeah, and critique the shit out of you.
Yeah, destroy you with like, oh my gosh, you are such a
piece of shit.
Yeah.
How dare you make that mistake?
Yeah, seriously. And there's like no room for just being human and like learning from mistakes, and like it's not safe to be imperfect.
Right.
And so that's the thing, like these parts can take on roles like that to protect us. And they're like badass, like they are like heroic, right? They help us survive really shitty situations, like, religious, religiously, I don't know.
Yeah.
I feel like the words,
traumatic experiences.
Unsafe situations.
Like, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. So they do help us survive that. But then once we, leave the unsafe situation, those patterns just keep acting that way.
Right.
And so that's why we need therapy. And that's why, or some way of healing, because unless we heal that pattern and go back and heal the trauma that it's kind of rooted in, those behaviors will continue, and it kind of will feel like we're kids, like we won't feel like we're fully able to embody like being an adult, because we have kind of these behaviors that we formed in childhood, and these parts of us don't really realize we're safe now. And like, we're good. Like those people that harmed you like that, and that God that was supposedly gonna throw you in hell and punish you, like that's gone and you're safe now. And so those parts don't know that.
It's interesting that so being raised in like a radical religious family and church with leaders, mostly men, right? White men in our experience. And then someone breaks free from that or leaves the church, normally having scars from family or people in the church disowning, right? Like pushing them out. So there's all of that.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of loneliness. But what you're saying is that so someone breaks free from that unsafe space, or in this case, the radical religious group, and there's almost like a developmental, if you will, like emotional cognitive developmental delay, if I'm hearing you correctly. That's like where when you do go to those parts, you're realizing how much you've been controlled or are being controlled by these younger pieces that were stunted maybe because of that trauma.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's kind of a good way to put it.
I mean, that's how it's felt. I was perfect when I, left the church, been perfect, striving for perfection. But then I, part of like right when I was out of the church, I just went head first right into like drugs and alcohol, like the classic, like, oh, pastor's kid. Like, but I was doing it in such a confident, perfect way. Like I was never, nothing ever fucked up in my life because I had to be perfect. But I also had to I was like acting like a child, like a teenager. And a lot of with my anger and outbursts and how I those parts that were just ruling me, like almost all of my 20s. Now I have these addictions to like speak for it. But it's interesting.
And those addictions would be like another kind of part, and those are like I know like the perfectionism and the self-critical parts kind of protect us from pain by preventing it, by like setting up an entire life around let's not activate the pain in any way. But then you have these other types of parts, and they're called like firefighters actually, that are like when the pain is activated, they'll get you the hell out of there. And kind of like a firefighter, they'll put out the flames, but they might also knock down the building. So they're not really concerned about if this will mess up your life at all or your family's life or anything. It's just like
put the fire out,
get them the hell out of there. You know what I mean?
Which is that's like the addictive parts you're talking about. That's so interesting because when the fires, I thought about that a lot. That like when the fires wreaked havoc in our county and we had all those fires. The firefighters, one of the things they would do is they'd go in and just break all the windows down or open in the houses to where like the heat could flow through. So houses just got destroyed by firefighters so that the house wouldn't burn up. So that's really an interesting perspective where it's like hopefully keeping the pain less, but ultimately it's destroying you in certain ways.
But, and that's the thing, like, and those firefighters, they're heroic, right?
They feel heroic. They're lifesavers.
Exactly. And that's the thing. And this is very different than how a lot of, people like look at addiction or all the parts of themselves. But internal family systems is non-pathologizing. So it's even saying, and I know you got that book, No Bad Parts right there.
Yeah, right.
But it's, in an IFS perspective, we don't demonize even those parts, that knock down the building trying to get you out of the pain.
No, I know. Yeah. And that's something I've been learning in my life. In this moment. We've talked about it a lot in this podcast, like how much cannabis has been such a godsend, like no pun intended. Mother Ganja has been such a unbelievable support system for my systems and has been the biggest firefighter of my life. And and I'm trying to like take another big break off of it. And it's so fucking hard. And I'm really, really hard on myself. It's like that part of me that doesn't have that firefighter. Right. Or like I'm really harsh on the firefighter. And then I'm like all now simultaneously being like, no, it's okay. I'm happy you're here. We're going to get through this. It's like a little bit different, but that's like brand new for me to be speaking. So, and I learned that a lot from my plant medicine retreat last year, which was like becoming a mother so that I can mother all of these things that ultimately have saved my life mentally in like so many ways and spiritually. Right. Like, so it's interesting.
And here's the thing, and we didn't actually talk about this yet, but it's super important, especially with IFS and just who we are, is that, we at our core are a little different, are not our parts. That at our core, we're not just parts that have a job. At our core, we are like, have limitless compassion and courage and confidence and clarity. It's got all these 8 C words, and there's some P words too, like perspective and playfulness and like connection, caring, like that is who we are at our core. And what I do with clients is help them get into that place of them, because the thing is, like, you're never gonna get those addictive parts to stop doing what they're doing by judging them.
Right.
Or critiquing them or saying, what the fuck are you doing? Like, this is not working,
Right.
So what I do is I help a client, well, first kind of get to know the part of them that is that harsh with them. and see if that one's willing to kind of relax a little to let us get to know like the firefighter part, the addictive part. But the only way you're going to get to know that is if you can get into the place inside of you that's that compassionate core, that's really curious about it, not to try and fix it or get rid of it or judge it, but it's like having a conversation with it and learning like why it's actually doing that. Because the truth of it is it's trying to help you in some way, and it actually probably is aware of pain deep within you that you don't even, that you're not even aware of.
Right.
You know? Well, it's like, hey, when you had this experience recently, it activated this part of you that's like, let's say 6 months old, that was like left in his crib with crying, with nobody to comfort him, and felt like totally helpless and scared and terrified, for example. And that got activated, a week ago. And I was aware of that. And I was like, let's get the hell out of this feeling, And I jumped in and protected you from that feeling, And so there's like this kind of stuff happening in our psyche that we're not aware of.
Even that, like young, like baby, like that's coming out into our adult selves.
That's the thing. And actually, I do have IFS on myself, and I feel because I'm trained in it, I'm able to go in and heal my own trauma. And not everyone, I'd say a lot of people can't do IFS on their own when it comes to going as deep as healing the trauma.
Having a guide. But
there is a lot people can do on their own to get to know themselves. But yeah, the earliest trauma that I've healed within myself was in utero as I was being born.
Wow. How beautiful.
And it was the most amazing thing, honestly, that I've ever, it was
like not psychedelics. This is just IFS therapy.
Yeah.
Like, wow.
Yeah. Actually, I was getting ready to do a psychedelic journey, and I was feeling this fear. And it was like a panic inside of me about doing that.
Tell me about it.
Yeah. I'm sure we all have those for different reasons.
Right.
And that's the thing. I'm not saying it's like has to be healed just because you're afraid. Like there may be some legitimate reasons to be afraid.
Sure. Absolutely.
But for me, it went all the way back to being in utero, about to be born. Because when I was born, I was unable to breathe.
Wow.
And so me being able to be with myself in that experience, and kind of witness what that was like for myself to go through that, but then also kind of like rewrite the story of like, hey, like what I needed to hear at that age was that like, hey, the people that are on the outside are going to do everything
help you breathe,
to help you. Yeah. Just hang in there. And, it was profound. And I'm sure I was crying because it was like, the message it needed to hear was love will catch you. And it was so reassuring at the deepest level for that little guy. And it allowed him to like be born into love and in my arms, and even my parents who did do everything to get him breathing again. But it kind of helped me work through the trauma of that. It was the most profound IFS experience I've ever had. I've had amazing ones with a practitioner, but that one on my own with myself was so profound. And so, yeah, I would say, and that's the thing, like, IFS helps us get to places that are sometimes like pre-verbal, or sometimes like, we don't have a conscious memory of this thing happened to me, but it still could be really affecting us and our nervous system. And like, we have a part of us hypervigilant because our system remembers, even if we don't consciously remember. So,
so what does it feel like to reconnect to that baby that can't breathe that you were saying?
Yeah. Well, that's the thing is you have to help, like for clients, I have to help them get into that compassionate state first. Because if you go to the baby and you're like, trying to like psychoanalyze it or, judge it or be like,
you won't get anywhere.
Yeah. Like if you come in like a part of you is like trying to fix it or trying to do something to it. It's different than coming in with this like really open-hearted, compassionate presence that feels safe to you, for one, to go into a potentially into a traumatic experience. Helps you feel safe going in there. But then you're able to provide this like, very open-hearted, compassionate, curious presence to this younger part of you in a way that helps it feel safe and helps it feel like, wow, I'm in this scary situation and like someone just came to save me. Someone that's like really loving and caring and powerful, and let's get out of here, but part of that process, so it feels just really safe in the way it works, and there's more to the process than that, and honestly, some people have so much trauma that even to just get to where I described to you guys just now, it might take a long time to get to that point.
Tell me about it. We're on take a long journey.
Yeah, exactly. Well, part of it is just to work with parts that don't feel safe going to the trauma. Like that, just protective parts. Like, and that's just how we're wired. Like our brains do not want us to go to pain, right? We'll do anything to avoid pain.
We hate, we don't want death.
Seriously.
Fear of death, fear of pain.
Yeah. So it's like very counterintuitive to invite like, hey, can you not protect us from pain from a little bit? Can we actually go to the pain intentionally? Are you cool with that?
Yeah.
Like not everybody, like it just makes sense that our system would have some fears about that.
Right.
Or just really need a lot of negotiating and safety and feeling our presence and feeling my presence, and that, hey, we're not trying to just go in there and change you or judge you or see how bad it is inside of you. Like we're going to do this carefully and intentionally.
Right.
I know what I'm doing. I know how to go where we're going to go. And so, it might take people a little bit of time to get to the place where they can trust that where we're going is going to be safe and it's going to help you and you're going to feel so much better. And what you find inside is going to be amazing.
Right.
It's going to be like, you might fear that deep down inside you, it's like bad. It's like evil. There's something shameful about you. There's something wrong with you, Like people are really afraid to see what's inside of them.
Especially those raised in, the Christian radical,
totally,
evangelical faith.
Yeah.
Where that is like, the world is horrible. It's, be in the world, but not of the world.
Yeah.
And, but you're born a sinner. So you come into this world bad. You come into this world evil.
Yeah.
You can't do anything good. You have to do it through Jesus. You have to do it through God.
You're inherently
so
not good.
You are not good.
Seriously.
Which I know that, and you brought up, this is Dr. Richard Schwartz, who I got his book, and that's the book here that I brought out. It's called No Bad Parts. And the self, that authentic self that, this was the guy that kind of like built this sort of practice right over the last 4 decades.
Yeah.
And he talks about the authentic self as being inherently good. And that's what you just said. That's what you're talking about.
Totally.
We were all raised radically in a religion that told you that you were inherently bad.
Exactly.
From the jump.
And that's why you needed to be saved, because you were inherently
God
bad.
will make you good, right?
Yeah, exactly.
God is good. God is love.
Yeah, right.
Right. You inherently
are not love.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
And then internal family systems kind of opens up the door and helps you get deeper into realizing that the cosmos comes from within us. Right. It's like birthing from within us.
Yeah.
It's like we're all God.
Yeah. And that's the thing, like, through the IFS process, and there may be other processes, it's just the one that I love the most, and am trained in. But that's the thing, it's like, you don't come into the world as a little baby thinking you're bad or thinking like you're broken or something's wrong with you or you're shameful or something. And so yeah, like that's a burden that's put on you, and
real
and a belief. Yeah, you come to believe that, and so IFS like is a beautiful way to help you release that belief.
Yeah,
and kind of go back to like the beginning when you were taught that. Yeah, and like release that. And honestly, part of releasing that isn't just say, okay, let's let that go. Are you ready to let that go? But part of it is like, us showing up in that moment with that younger part of us. And like I said, giving them what they really needed in that moment when that terrible thing happened. So it could be like going back and being like, and this doesn't come from our minds. It's not like us saying, oh, I think I know what's best for this one, but kind of letting that one guide us. But yeah, it could be like being in that moment when, you're sitting in church and you realize, you're taught for the first time, you're a sinner, you're terrible, you need Jesus, you're bad inside. But this time it's like with us sitting next to them.
Yeah.
And then we're like, what did you need in that moment? And they're like, I just need someone to stand up and say, fuck you to the pastor, and say, no, I'm really good. And get me the hell out of there,
Yeah.
Like some adult or somebody that's powerful to just say, let's get out of there. Or they might say like, I just need to stand up and say, this is bullshit. I don't believe this about myself, but I just need you holding my hand while I do it,
Wow.
And it's like something
Such
that they need.
Coddling motherly role.
It's so,
and father, whatever,
Yeah, it is. It's like, and that's the thing. We're able to like kind of infuse our courage into the moment. And so, and like give them, it like rewrites the story in our psyche. It's like that bad thing happened, but then this happened and it righted that. And now we're going to live based on the righted version. And it's like rewriting over that part in our brain and creating a new story, and then getting them the hell out of there, because then they don't have to be like trapped in that memory in our body, like trapped back in time, like we can kind of get them out of there and just and help them feel safe. And then we're taking care of them now, it's like, hey, we'll keep you safe. We'll connect with you if you're ever feeling down or sad or angry or anything. Like, I'll be here for you, and I'm going to care, and I'm going to take time to be with you. And, it's not going to be like back in the day when you're just told, be anxious for nothing, or some Bible verse. You just pray more, You're actually responded to. Like, we can learn to love ourselves in that way. And that can be especially healing too. It's just a renewed relationship with ourselves. We're going to take the time to be with ourselves and like love ourselves in the way that we've always needed.
Wow. Yeah, that was really good. I think it's weird, right? We all know ourselves. Like, I assume we all think we know ourselves so well. And I think that like how much of that is just conditioned behavior versus it being truthfully your own being, your truth. Yeah. So and I say that all the time on this cast, I've been saying that for so long, for years of my life, is like my truth. Yeah. You hear these terms, truth to power, speaking truth to power. And like a lot of this is like, how do we really discover our truth? What is that authentic self?
Yeah.
And so this internal family systems is this idea. It's like this whole entire approach to being able to get there.
Yeah.
But then the actual practice of it, right, is kind of like indefinite. It never ends.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so like what you do is because you can go to therapy, you can talk to a therapist, and there's like huge powers that come from that, just continued therapy or talking with anybody. But you actually have these intense, I don't want to say intense, but you have these sessions that are like IFS, like we're going to have an IFS session to where you facilitate in helping somebody get to that part when they maybe they think they know themselves really well, or they know they can get there, then ultimately having a guide. Yeah. And I think of it like, even think about like, there is maybe a therapeutic and safe way to do psychedelics. And I've always experienced like where you can do like psychedelics in like a fun party way with friends, or you can do it in a facilitated way with a guide. And those are like astronomically different.
Yeah.
Right?
Totally.
Just having somebody there that isn't in the same place you are, isn't using the same medicine, but they're specifically there to help you through this experience that ultimately is really confusing. It can be really scary. And so it sounds like an IFS session can probably be really scary, or it can be intimidating, really emotional. Like it's a journey, right, to get to that spot.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. It sounds like it would be intense. I mean, it's what I say, a better word maybe would be like, it's like serious and important, but we can do it in a way that doesn't feel intense. Because if it felt intense, all the protective mechanisms would be activated.
Right.
And they'd be like, hell no, we're not doing this, you know?
Right.
So that's the thing, is we can help people get into a calm state and then go to the trauma, because that really is a big part of the healing, is that somebody kind of remembers the memory that was traumatic while in a calm state. That, whether it's IFS or EMDR or some other thing, that to me is a big part of the healing, is that you can experience it, like takes the powerful energy out of that traumatic memory. And it's not like you stop remembering it, but it takes away the intensity of it. So like while I was driving into town, driving through Petaluma on the way here, right?
Don't you love that? Come into this podcast, come back to your trauma.
Yeah.
The space.
Well, that's the thing. Like I know, I'm sure you and I, all you guys and myself had different experiences with church and trauma and all that. Like I don't consider my time at Calvary Chapel, Petaluma, to be traumatic. But what was traumatic is Petaluma is where my dad was homeless, like in my early 20s.
Okay.
So I'm driving through and I'm like, oh, wow, there's where my dad's homeless camp was, right under that bridge, right there.
Oh, wow.
Where all these memories happened. And then, driving through and like, oh, wow, I'm going up the hill where I'm like in the car driving my dad who's drunk to detox. And we're like listening to Keith Green and he's singing drunk. And I'm like, wow, this is like my only chance to like connect with my dad, So I'm like getting all these memories coming to me that I would say definitely are trauma, like really hard stuff that I went through when I was like in my early 20s. And so I'm getting all these memories as I'm driving through, and even as we were getting ready to do this podcast, you told me you live by the fairgrounds. Right. I was like, oh, wow. My dad used to live by the fairgrounds.
Are we close to anywhere near that?
We're a little ways away.
Okay, good. Thank
you. But we are right next to where I got my first accident. So,
oh, wow.
Yeah, so that's special memory. But yeah, and then I think of all the trauma that happened when he lived at that house, like really terrible stuff. But the thing is, it doesn't activate me in the same way anymore. I've done healing.
It used to when you came back. It used to be
it used to be so traumatic, like, and I wouldn't say traumatic, but activating of the trauma and of like so hard to come into this town. But now it's like I've done healing in each of those memories, and it's like, oh, I remember them, but it's like, it's okay. I can come here. I still have family here.
Wow.
Let's create new memories, like we're doing right now. Let's create this memory here together about healing.
Welcome to the new church.
Yeah.
I've always thought about IFS. I mean, it was very recently introduced to me from my fiance in school with this book.
Yeah.
And I haven't read it yet, so I can't really speak too much on it. But just thinking of your trauma as a separate person helps not make it so intense. I feel like when you connect with it too much, you can't really deal with it. And so a lot of my therapy coming out of religious trauma and not even knowing it, not even identifying it, like at 19, 20, I would be too scared to know what this anxiety is. And so it would be like, you need to meditate and bring your energy down. And it's like, I'm meditating. And it's like nothing was working. But then if you can just kind of be like, well, here's this scared boy. I'm just going to watch him. What does he need? That's so different than being the scared boy asking what he needs. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And you might find like, oh, I need to calm him down.
Yeah.
And like it, I mean, if you're a parent, like in your child's anxious, like telling them to calm down.
Yeah.
That's like telling a partner to relax.
Yeah, seriously.
Relax.
Just relax.
Yeah, exactly.
Like,
yeah. So, I'm not surprised that didn't work, you know?
But that's what I love about IFS, honestly, or at least the more I'm learning about it, that's what I love about it, is this little separation from the trauma.
Totally.
Because it does feel like they're just parts of you that you can heal.
Yeah.
And once you fully believe that, then you can start that practice.
Yeah. And that's the thing. Like, if you can, like you said, see it as like a younger boy or somebody, you know, however it's showing up in your psyche. It could be a person or an animal or who knows what, you know what I mean? But it's just like, if you can, like if it was somebody that you know and love that's scared, you'd be like, it'd open up your heart to them.
Yeah.
It'd be like, from a compassionate place, let's not try and just make you not be scared. Let's get to know why you're scared. Because honestly, it could be trauma related. It could be like, oh, wow, all people are a danger to me because I've been rejected so much or bullied so much. So it's like the past coming back to make you afraid, right? But it also could be a legitimate thing to be afraid of. I wouldn't say it's illegitimate if it's trauma-based, but it could be like, hey, this person is actually
dangerous.
Yeah, unsafe. Yeah, exactly.
Like real, yeah.
Yeah, like your body could be just be like,
this is a good thing.
This is not, So it's like, why would you want to get rid of that feeling?
That's important.
It's actually helping you, not do the dangerous thing.
Yeah.
So, but you wouldn't really know that unless you got into conversation with it.
Totally.
You know?
Totally.
And so you're right. Like seeing it as kind of a separate entity or part of you, it just is so different than being in the part and being like, I'm anxious, Because then it is kind of like we're the little boy that's anxious.
Yeah.
And we're a lot less likely to get our needs met, if we're just acting from that place.
Totally.
Versus connecting with that part of us and then saying, this is what you need to feel safe. And then we provide safety, and maybe they need a hug from our partner or something like that, and we can help them get their needs met in that way. You know what I mean?
It's like the same way you can have a successful romantic partnership or a really good parenting relationship with your kids. Like with my son, will go through something, and as a parent, I ultimately can feel feelings of reaction pretty quick with everything he goes through, right?
Yeah,
like,
totally.
Oh, let me help you not feel that.
Yeah.
Right? Like, oh, no, let me protect you from that. Like, my reaction is I don't want him to be in pain. I don't want him to hurt at all. Let me take care of that burden for you.
Yeah.
And I'm learning as a parent that, like, it's probably incredibly important for my son to experiencing his own pain and for me just to be always there by his side.
Yeah.
Right? Like, the whole journey.
Yeah.
And to have, like, to be seen, to feel seen.
Yeah.
To be reminded that you're good.
Yeah.
Like, all the things that we're so, I don't know what you want to say, like coated with the blood of Jesus Christ in our lives.
Yeah.
And I didn't feel that, like, I mean, my parents were so coddling in certain ways and then non-existent in other, like in these ways, right?
Exactly.
Where like there were bad parts. And so as a kid, like for me, just thinking about how to think about it, like I've discovered one of my parts and been speaking to them now for like a year. And he's like this 8-year-old. Very, very loud and rambunctious little 8-year-old. It's just so
I can
pure.
see him right now.
Yeah.
And the other one's about
that one.
the other one's 17, and he is aggressive as fuck. Like one way or the highway. Like don't tell me what to do.
Yeah.
Parenting that is my new journey of being with that part, and that's like very difficult. Like being able to like see the 17-year-old and trust and be like, I'm here for you. We're gonna get through this. Like another part of me is a lion.
Oh, cool.
That is like super scary and also like beautiful and like the coat's so nice and like lions are so cuddly, right? They're just like so inherently such family oriented, so like I've like had so much fun. I personally have never done a like real IFS.
Yeah.
I know like my wife who read through this, she did the audiobook of this, which is the whole audiobook is full of like practices, right? Where they like, and so she did the audiobook and it was like pretty ridiculous how transformative. Just her having this audiobook, finding it.
That's so awesome.
She started, she named like, and I know she's totally fine with me sharing some of this, but like everything that all of her parts are like the weather reporter.
Oh,
or the architect.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Wow. She like identifies them as
like all of these like jobs or these roles.
Interesting.
And she'll talk of herself that way. Like, when you did that, I just realized the weather reporter was talking, and I want to let you know that like,
wow, I love that.
So cool.
Yeah.
I don't think of it that way, but I love that people do.
And I'll be like, well, I'm going to be the lion.
Yeah.
That's cool.
That's awesome. Yeah. There's so many ways. I think it is kind of unique to each person and how they
identify.
Like for me, they're all like younger.
Child.
Yeah. Like I have a whole timeline of my, pictures of myself on my wall from like birth all the way up to now. And like a picture, thankfully my grandparents like saved those of like my pictures of almost every year all the way up. And so like when I do like a healing, I'll be like, oh, that's me at this age,
Wow.
And then I'll be like interaction with them. Like a lot of my sexual curiosities and energies now, some of that's like teenage and younger adults related parts, but some of it's just like, like also just being an adult,
You're right. Yeah.
And so I don't know, it's just like a fun reconnection with parts with yourself. And honestly, it's like loving yourself at every age.
Totally.
Instead of like, I think a lot of us, when we come out of like Christianity or religion, we just hate that younger Christian self.
Oh yeah, you despise
it's
it.
Like, how did you tell people that stuff? How did you treat people that way? It's like we have all this self-hate. But if we came to get to know that younger Christian self part of us, like we just be like, holy shit, like that was genius. You figured out how to play the game to survive all of that horrific stuff.
Interesting.
I love you. You're awesome. And you don't have to do that anymore if you're cool with that. Like
almost like
we're safe.
Look how well you survived.
Yeah. You come to that appreciation about yourself. And that's why it's so valuable to get to know all these parts of you, because from an open-hearted place.
Yeah.
Because then you're like, wow, like all these parts of me, they're not bad because they're actually what kept me alive. How else do you survive being told that you're going to be forever banished from God and from the whole community? Like that is probably the most terrifying thing you could tell anybody, especially a kid.
It's horrific.
Like, how do you imagine your psyche is going to protect you from that happening? You have this natural part of you that's like, wow, okay, I'm going to do what they say I have to do to avoid that. That is heroic.
Yeah.
Like we judge it now. Like, why did you accept Christ? That was such bullshit. How could you believe that? But if we think, oh wow, that actually saved you from this feeling that you are going to be forever in hell,
right,
and banished from the community, like, that was genius. Kudos to you. Like,
we've always
what a great strategy.
That we always said, like, the trauma doesn't actually the trauma might not actually present itself at all unless you left, right? That's like the cult, right? When you're in the cult, you're fine. You're safe because you're in the cult. Even if there's all this horrible shit happening and all that, your brain will do every survival instinct mechanism, which in Christianity too, and Calvary Chapel specifically, it's, I guess, freaking, like
hyper avoidance
pyramid scheme to keep you into those, tunneled visions, perspectives, right? That are just kind of like one way or the highway.
To use like my anxiety as an example, the only way to deal with it was to ignore it. And so I was always told to like pray all the time for sure. Maybe learn meditation. That was like a big one. Like maybe it is from the Eastern religion,
of course.
But
satanic.
Yeah, it's horrible. Don't ever meditate.
But to like separate yourself from it instead of asking yourself why you might be dealing with it, why you might be scared.
Yeah.
And I feel like so many Christians today, and I again don't want to talk bad about the religion at all, but like it is put all your trust in God, not yourself. You're not worthy to have it, and like that life is just a struggle. You're starting from a struggling experience.
Yeah.
Whereas you come out of it if you're able to make it out alive
Yeah.
and you take control. And I feel like IFS is a great tool of taking control.
Yeah.
I mean,
It is
the Bible literally says,
helpful.
deny yourself,
I know.
pick up the cross and walk.
Yeah.
So completely forget about who you are. Pick up this burden.
Which is a symbol of just a terrible death.
Violent crucifixion.
Yeah.
Right.
Put it on your shoulders and walk.
Right. Exactly.
Sinner.
Yeah.
Pick up your cross and
gosh,
walk.
How much work.
Yeah.
But I lived by that for so long. And I think even after I left the church, right? It was like, and I think that's what you initially started off by saying, that it's like, you have this, whatever, you're radicalized and you come out of the church. How long does it take? Or like, instead of just being, okay, I'm living, it's like, when do you start thriving? When do you start really getting to like know these parts, or when these things started? Because these parts were driving forces, and some of them still are very strongly in my life.
Yeah.
That stemmed specifically, like, I know, not speaking bad about the religion, but like Christianity does a pretty good job at like really creating these, if you will, ruling parts in us that are all like, you are a sinner, you're not good, you're not inherently good, you need this man who died on a cross, you need this God, who said they're God, I am God, like trust that one person, and all of humanity is based off. And if people don't do that, then they're lost. So you've found the truth. Like, there's all these things that are just like conditioned that are so the opposite of this.
Yeah.
Literally, it feels like the opposite than this approach.
Totally. Yeah.
So you said perfectionism.
Yeah.
And you said the skeptic. Like, what have you seen just in your practice? Like, my first question would be like, how long has it been since you've been out of the church?
Yeah. Well, it's been a little over 4 years.
So fairly recent.
Yeah, but fairly recent, but I know I've shared a little bit about this, but I did intensive therapy.
Yeah.
I went all in, after that experience, I was like, I'm committed. That was like me showing up for 90-minute IFS sessions weekly for like a year and a half.
Wow.
And doing like therapeutic psychedelic experiences, like with a guide with me. So I was like very committed to healing at the deepest level. And interestingly, I realized coming out of one, it was also some of it was actually based on like, something's wrong with me and I have to fix it. And that can also be an unhealthy thing too,
Yeah.
Because it's like, wow, especially if it comes from like, I need to fix myself to like be accepted by others, like it gets a little sketchy there. And, like, but it did help me get to a place where now I would say I'm able to like safely and be myself authentically. And I've done enough healing around like the perfectionism, people pleasing, self-criticism, I'm able to just come to myself and take care of myself from a curious perspective and just be like, it feels safe to authentically be myself in the world and to find people that I feel safe with being myself with. And like those are some of the parts that I would say I got healing around. And then I feel like for a lot of Christians and just doing this work, I've come to see like there are specific parts that I would say are pretty dominant when you have religious trauma. And so, like you mentioned, like
perfectionism is one we see with a lot of people.
Yeah, super harsh inner critic, like ridiculously impossible standards,
Yeah, tell me about it.
Yeah. So, and let's see, what else is there?
You said people pleasing.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's an interesting one too, because, everybody's heard of like fight or flight, like those are pretty well known, like trauma responses, but fawning is another one. Fawning, and it's like, I have to please the threat, I have to,
interesting.
like I'm intimidated by you because I think you're going to reject me for some reason. So
I have to please.
I have to impress you, or I have to do everything I think you want me to do. And I mean, talk about fawning. Like you can, this is very interesting too. I did want to mention this, you know, we can have like a trauma bond with God as a Christian. And I think some of that is kind of like fawning, because it's like the person that's abusing us is also the person that we're supposed to love, and that loves us too, supposedly. So we kind of like commingle trauma and love. And so we basically like come to love our abuser. And then I think fawning can be kind of a part of that too, is like the person judging us, we have to please them at all costs. So, you know, like and it's all in our mind, right? God's not actually there.
Yeah,
like,
right.
It's all fictional, you know, but it feels, we're told it's real and we believe it's real. And then we can be in this fawning response. It's just like, I have to please everybody that I'm afraid of, and, you know, always be good, and always, you know, kind of like kiss ass. I mean, it's a terrible term, but it kind of is like that, you know?
I totally relate to that with just growing up as a kid in the church.
Yeah. Okay.
Because there's so many like, I don't want to use the word scary people, but people that were like pretty intense and scary. And the church is all about love. And when you're raised in it, oh man, fawning is so big. I want to make them happy. I want to make them think I'm a good Christian, and all the things. Yeah. Totally relatable.
Yeah. And you can, I mean, all of these can kind of become like your personality.
Totally.
You're just the nice guy.
Yeah.
You know, you're just like so nice. You never stand up for yourself. You never tell people what you really think. You're just nice.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, nice people, I mean, it can get you places, but it like, you hold back on some of who you really
it's exhausting
are.
Too.
Yeah.
You get home and you're like, oh, I'm so unhappy.
Yeah. All the
you're
stuff
just drained.
Yeah. All the stuff you didn't express.
Yeah.
Because it, you know, just to get through, just to survive the day, you know?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that's the thing. There's all these like parts of us that are just, we just think it's our personality, but we don't realize it's all this stuff we do to protect ourselves from pain. And to me, that's that's kind of the take home I would want to like deliver for this podcast. If I could tell people what to take home.
The red carpet is yours.
Yeah. It's just this whole idea that really the way to get free, if you really want freedom in your life, like to actually wake up and choose to the highest degree what you want to do with your life, what you want to create, and to feel like you have power to do that, is just, you got to heal your trauma.
Right.
Because those parts will be in charge until you do.
Wow.
And you'll just consider that your personality. Oh, there was this great quote, I think, by Carl Jung. I think I said his name wrong, but
whatever.
Who cares? That's perfectionist. But he's like, I think it's something like, until you make the unconscious conscious, it'll rule your life and you'll call it fate.
Wow.
That's what it is, you know? Like, people don't realize that how much of what they're doing is not freedom. It's just to prevent pain or get them out of pain. And to me, that's as far from freedom as you really get.
Absolutely.
Honestly, there is no freedom. It's like, this is how I act in this situation to protect myself, you know?
Right.
And then you're also not living like from an open-hearted place. You're not like safe in your own body. And like, honestly, before I did interviews, I've done tons of interviews and public stuff, especially when I was a Christian and sex addiction therapist, tons of public things.
Yeah.
Is it hard for you to have that all still public? Because I'm guessing they're still public.
Well, like a lot of the recordings are. I've thought about going back and taking stuff down, but I figure I've let at least the people that follow me know that I've changed. But I haven't gone back. I've thought about it. I unpublished my book, but there's so many interviews that I'm like, that's my recovery story out there. And people are still listening to that. But yeah, I haven't fully gone back and requested people to like withdraw that stuff,
I would almost say that might be a part of the perfectionist as well, is to try to perfect this person too.
Yeah, perfect your image.
It just depends. I think if you were to become more into the public light, like in your however they look, I think you would probably want to maybe,
especially in today's day and age of the internet.
You're much more private, besides, coming on the Mortal Kombat podcast, which is extremely popular. So.
Of course, it's getting more popular. It is. It's awesome.
I'm kidding.
Yeah. No, it's a great podcast.
I was going to say this perfectionism, unless you were going to say something else. Were you going to say something else?
Well, I was going to say something just about the interviews. Yeah. So that's the thing is when I was doing all that sex addiction work and writing my book, and I would do like ads in the newspaper, like about fighting like the new 50 Shades of Grey movie and the Hustler Hollywood store that's coming into town. Like I was very anti-porn and very public about it.
Damn, yeah.
Yeah, I was really passionate. But then I would do interviews too, and like that was before I did any of like my deep trauma healing. And so I would say a lot of what I presented in those interviews was like performance and perfectionism and like I know how to impress people and I know how to be smart and I am smart and so a lot of fawning and a lot of I'm not safe unless I impress you, you know? Mm-hmm. And honestly, that's part of what I loved. I think what I loved about our last interview and this one now and just feeling in my body what it feels like to be here with you guys. It's like none of that.
Wow.
It's like, before I got here, I'm checking in with myself. How am I feeling? What do I want to talk about? Do I have any feelings?
Mm-hmm.
And just like settling into like being here with you guys and trusting myself and trusting the process and being safe.
Yeah.
And like not being caught up on like, oh, wow, I got to come off as so smart and impress everyone and get clients and just be this amazing expert, But the reason I say that is because I was caught in that part so much in the past.
Wow.
And it just feels so different. I mean, but I appreciate that part of me still. I totally get why you felt you needed to do that.
Yeah.
Especially with like a lot of childhood of feeling abandoned and invisible and like I'm fighting for attention and stuff. So I have like a ton of compassion for that younger guy that did all that stuff. But then I guess I just want to test to like how different it feels to feel healing from all this and to just be like, wow, I can just be here with you guys, be real. I don't feel like I need to impress you.
You can be a super smart, well-educated, helping soul that isn't perfect.
Yeah. Well, hey, that's me.
Which is like, I was just gonna say that perfectionism, even using our podcast as like the scapegoat, we try to make this podcast fucking perfect.
To
the point to where me and Zach have gotten in fights in this studio. Every time we set up cameras and we get ready for a new podcast, we get to see how much we're healing as brothers and as people producing a show where we consistently try. And Zach is so much different than me in this. And like, I have my own versions of perfectionism.
Yeah.
And like, we want this to be perfect. And that plays a huge role of stress. And perfectionism has been a huge part in my life to this day.
Yeah.
And I feel like that might be one of the longest form parts that I'm getting closer and closer to trying to like heal more, just like be softer with.
Yeah.
Because like I also get to live like in a life where I get to like reap the benefits of being perfect.
Yeah.
Right. In all my relationships with my boss and all of my patients and like my friends and colleagues and like people that trust me and then provide and offer me opportunities based on like, and how like, it's just been like fascinating how that is something that has been living with me forever. And I think that like even outside of the church, right? Like what is the American dream? Pull yourself up by the bootstraps, buy a home, right? Like keep work about 9 to 5 every day and be a hard worker, work hard, like build up your money and your finance. So there's like this drive in our culture to be perfect or to be strong and to never stop growing and becoming the best version of yourself.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, our country is a dog-eat-dog world where it's, you know, everyone's for themselves.
Yeah.
There's very little social structure that's actually, it's like not, the country wasn't built on that. So not only on a religious sense, it's like also culturally, there's so much that has been like in my brain and in my body. It's kind of like in every situation, it's like, I got to be the best.
Yeah.
So if I'm going to work out, I got to have the best workout.
Yeah.
If I'm going to play drums in this band or I'm going to provide this, I got to be the best drummer.
Yeah.
And like you and I were kind of briefly talking about that aspect, that I was like a major percussionist drummer in the church from like 12 years old with my dad. And I was a perfect drummer. And I helped people like find Jesus through my drums. They're like, yo, I've never heard anyone drum like that. Like, you don't even think you're trying. And I'd be like, wow, thank you, bless you. Like, it's all Jesus through me at 12.
Yeah.
And that developed to being this perfectionist as a percussionist to where like every band I was in after the church and I was just like drunk or whatever, I could be hammered, but I was like this really, really fluid drummer that was like could play with anybody. Yeah. And it was like this cockiness that developed for this overly confident. Yeah. And it's like, and I think when you and I were talking about this earlier, it was kind of like, or maybe, I don't know if it was somebody that like made this comment. They're like, do you feel like maybe you didn't have a choice to be perfect at drumming or not? Yeah. And when they asked me that, I was like, holy shit. Yeah. Did I actually choose to be a good drummer, or was that like something out of survival? Yeah. Where it was like, I'm going to be in front of this church and people are going to be like giving their life to Christ because of my drumming. I better be the best version ever.
Yeah, exactly.
Because now I struggle with like wanting to play drums that much. Yeah. Because it's like this whole new part of me that's like, or like I'm finally like starting to learn like, oh, there's a lot of things in my life I'm really, really, really good at. Yeah. Because I maybe was forced to be perfect out of survival. Totally. It's fascinating.
Yeah. And that's a great example, you know, and honestly, like, and that's where I think if you were to like do some IFS with that part of you and get to know that part of you, like, you would probably take you back to, you know, I'm just guessing, like you said, the church or wherever you learned that being perfect keeps you safe, you know? Right. Like, of course you do what you need to do to stay safe. That's what your body's designed to do. And to add to that, like, just bring a little piece in here. Like, I think a lot of religious trauma is like considered complex trauma, complex PTSD. Yes. Because that's the thing is
join us. CPTSD.
Yeah. It may not just be one event that happened where you're like, oh man, I got to be perfect now. But, you know, one of the traits of complex PTSD, which you guys may know, is just that you're in a traumatic or unsafe situation and you can't get out. It's continuous. And that is its own, you know, complex trauma, because it's not like you can recall just, oh yeah, here's the time that happened.
It's like multiple times.
Yeah. It's not specific to one moment.
Yeah. Yeah. So it you know, I mean, it doesn't mean you can't get healing with it, but yeah, it may take a little longer, and it may be revisiting parts multiple times and going through different experiences. And, but yeah, it's definitely doable. And that's the thing, like, you can still be an amazing drummer. Right. But it's like it takes the feeling out that if you're not amazing, or like if this podcast wasn't perfect, that you'd be safe. Yeah. And you'd be okay. And honestly, maybe you might feel some feelings still, like, oh man, I feel disappointed or something, but it's like trusting that your future self will catch you. Oh, if you're not perfect. Wow. It's I love that. You'll be safe. Yeah. It's like trusting that, like, hey, if we have an imperfect interview, you know, like I have food on my face the whole interview or something. Like,
you have. Sorry.
Oh, shoot. You should have mentioned that. I wondered. I felt something there.
I know that's your nose ring. Sorry.
Nice. Yeah, that was intentional. But yeah, it's like, okay, if it's kind of like when I was preparing for this interview, I was like, okay, I have all these things I want to say, but I was like trusting, okay, but also I'm going to trust that I'm just going to be myself in this interview. And if there's something, I wish I would have said to just make it even better, like, I'll forgive myself and it'll just be like, maybe I'll add it to a blog post or something. It was just like low intensity, the idea of like messing up in some way,
Yeah. So much intention. Like you just giving yourself the space and time. I mean, I know for any interview, right, there's going to be that, right? You want to do your best or whatever. And you want to say the things you want to.
Definitely.
But like in all of life, like if you just give yourself a little space and time to communicate with that part and just being like that, whatever.
Yeah.
It's setting yourself up for actually success.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Because perfectionism trying to be perfect or like allowing that part to rule can also like help you say things you didn't really mean.
Yeah.
Right? Or go down tangents that are like you think are perfect, or you think you're saying something that they want to hear, the same ideas like fawning, right? Like I'm going to say what these people want to hear, I think, to make their podcast better or whatever. When like the goal is just to be like 100% what it is. And let it be. Yeah. And that's not easy.
No.
It's taken for just like using our podcast as an example, like, well, I don't know, actually. I think our podcast was probably our first art project where we actually were like, we started off being like, this ain't going to be perfect. We know shit. Like we set up our iPhones first. We did it in my house.
Which was still really good. Like
I'm sure it was.
We put a lot of time into editing and everything, and it was still really good. But we weren't doing the religious trauma yet. And even when we started to incorporate that in like episode, I want to say like 17, it never got aired, and it was a really deep parental religious trauma, and we had to redo it, and it was like our first experience of us failing ourselves. But then now to get to episode 70, we've interviewed a handful of people. The real stress now is I feel like we owe it to the people we're interviewing because they're telling their trauma story,
Geez,
And we've had, I think, 4 podcasts that have never aired because a camera goes off or something.
Luckily not with a guest.
Not with a guest. And so like when you were bringing up like the stressors or the perfection, like my thing is, I owe it to them though.
Yeah.
It's one thing if we mess up a podcast ourselves, it's like, we failed us.
Oh yeah.
But like to fail someone else is like, it hasn't happened yet. Fingers crossed. We really try to make sure it doesn't happen.
Yeah.
That perfection comes, for me at least, that perfection comes almost for the guest.
Yeah. And so I'd be curious, like, what are you afraid would happen?
I would just
for the
feel,
guest,
I think the guest would feel pretty bummed if they just went through like a really emotional interview. They felt really good about it. And then us to be like, hey, it didn't work. We can schedule another one. Let's try to get back in that place. It's like we already have like discovered how tough it is to get back to that place.
Right.
I would hate for a guest to have to do that. Because it's already so hard to come talk about it.
Yeah. But then I would just throw in there that if that did happen, like if that happened here for this interview even, like it'd still be okay.
Yeah, totally.
You know? And be like, okay, well, I get to hang out with you guys another time. I mean, let's do this, like, I don't know. And to me, that's the thing is like trusting that it'll be okay if you do mess up, and
trusting your future self. I love that.
And I just did this interview with someone for this like purity culture program that's really amazing. And actually, one of the things that she mentioned was that is not even really using the term failure, but using the term learning experience instead, And so it just takes away all this pressure, like, oh my gosh, I can't fail. Because every time we do fail is when we learn the most. I'm sure you guys learn the most after all these mess ups, it's like kind of
it's
the road.
It's what got us to buy cameras. It's got us to do a lot of stuff.
That night we spent like over $1,000. Like in that night, I was like, sit down. We're buying the equipment we need. We're going in debt.
I think I texted you like at midnight because we already had them in our shopping carts. I was like, I'm buying mine right now. Buy yours. Like we're not doing this anymore.
Yeah. We'll see. You learn so much through making mistakes.
Totally.
And then that's the thing is if you can, just trust yourself, which is, I'd say another part we come out of religion with is not trusting ourselves.
Yeah, we're not supposed to.
Yeah, and like not trusting our feelings or our body or us that we're capable of actually making like really good decisions without like some authority telling us what to do.
Right.
I mean, that's a whole another thing to learn, you know?
Talk about a mindfuck.
Seriously. Yeah. You're totally dependent on somebody else.
A powerful source outside of you telling you or helping you.
Exactly.
It actually can be just you.
You can find that.
That's what you're saying is like ultimate freedom.
Yeah. And your inner compass, you know? It's kind of, I think in church, like that's like blasphemy, you know, to trust yourself. Like you said, you're supposed to deny yourself. You're supposed to trust God, the religious authorities, you know, the Bible. Those are the things that know about you and what you're supposed to do with your life. You don't know.
I don't know shit.
You're depraved, right? You're evil. You're just going to follow your flesh. Your sinful desires are going to lead you astray. Like, talk about not trusting yourself. So, yeah, if you leave religion, you probably will have no experience learning to trust yourself or even listen. So, I mean, yeah, there's just so many parts of us that I think helped us survive religion that just stay with us after we leave. And so it's just like, you know, just bringing so much patience and compassion to ourselves. Like, okay, I was in this for decades. That's such a traumatic thing to go through, and it's going to take me time to learn like how to actually be myself in this world. And it's okay that it's going to take a while. And it might take the rest of my life in lots of ways too. And I'm just going to like bring so much compassion and be like, yeah, that was like crazy what you went through. So yeah, it's okay if it takes as long as you need. You know, we'll just be in this together. You know, you can kind of have that loving relationship with yourself. That's just such a amazing feeling, you know?
It's like rediscovering your intuition.
Yeah.
I feel like
totally
the religion takes your human intuition or yourself, your spirit, and turns it into God. And so you can't even relate with it.
Yeah.
And so when your intuition kicks in, you don't even recognize it. And so you leave the faith and now you're starting to communicate with this intuition of yourself.
Yeah.
And you're listening to it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so amazing. It's funny because, you know, I think I know the Bible so well. I still get verses popping into mind. Probably you guys too. But I'm like, oh, there's the still small voice, you know?
Yeah. Right.
And it's interesting because it's
still
like
small voice.
Yeah.
Thanks for triggering me.
Oh, yeah.
No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah. Of course. But yeah, it's interesting because like we can learn to tune into the voice inside of us. That's our wisdom. That's our self that knows what's best for us. And that's the thing too, though. Like if it's an unhealed part of us speaking to us, that's like, you know, has some story that's like trauma based, you know, like, and that's possible too. And we might listen to that too. But that's the thing is the more healing we can get, the more we can tune into what is our intuition, you know, what is our truth. Oh, that's another piece of self, you know. I didn't mention, maybe I mentioned this, but it's clarity. You can come to such a awareness of just such a clarity that's not from a part of you, but from like your core. And you can realize stuff that's like, wow, I just know on the deepest level, this is what's right for me.
Wow.
And I'm going to do it.
Yeah, so, instead of being like, I think God's calling me to move to Hawaii. Right? That was like such a common, like, I think God wants me to marry that girl. And you're like, really? Does she want to? Does she think God's going to want? Yeah. Instead, it's you knowing with like that sort of internal confidence.
You got to own it. If you say it, it's you. But if you say God's calling me, it's like, well.
Or you just get what you want by saying God's calling you to it, right?
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
100%.
God's telling me to buy this Tesla. I'm not saying it's, I'm just, you know, like then you go buy yourself a nice car because God's, you know, giving
we did see that a lot in church too.
We saw that so much in the church.
God told me I needed my fifth car.
And like, as the pastor's kids, we saw a lot behind the curtain.
Oh, I bet.
Yeah.
Well, and think about like how the Bible was created. It's all these people thinking they heard from God.
Yeah.
And it ends up being a lot of just really fucked up shit that was created from people that had all this unhealed trauma. And like, I don't know. I see the Bible so differently now. Like,
oh, totally.
It's just there's so much wrong with it and so much problematic that leads to a lot of problems in the world, you know? And think about it. It was all these people that supposedly thought God was
thousands of years
talking
ago,
to them, you know?
And men.
Yeah, totally.
If there were any women that were sharing their piece in it, they took that out of the Bible.
Yeah.
Right? It's like all
totally.
men.
Yeah.
It's very skewed.
Yeah. And I was going to say, like, I loved Julia's interview, you know? Like, I loved that interview.
So good.
It was so good. And just
special
seeing how many people responded to that. Yeah. But, you know, it's just one of those things that made me realize afterwards, like, she has such an amazing heart and brain and so many gifts. And, like, to think that the church would, like, discount her and say, you know, you can't speak and you don't have a place and you can't lead. It's just mind-blowing. Like, what the fuck is going on here? Seriously.
And then
like, the church would be so much better.
You can even go on our YouTube right now and like, because while we're recording this episode, there's shorts and the clips that are still going up. And our podcast is full of Christians commenting on all the stuff that we talk about.
No way.
And so
that's amazing.
It's almost like our podcast is starting to provide a really, really easy way to see the trauma or to see the
culture,
the culture coming back and being like,
wow,
actually, she's completely wrong. It says in the Bible, this verse, women did it. And you're like, thank you for proving our point.
Yeah, exactly.
Because it can sound pretty barbaric to people who weren't raised in it.
Yeah.
And then it's like, but there's still people like indoctrinating people and saying that a woman shouldn't be in charge. A woman shouldn't have a word.
Seriously. Yeah. And again, it's just like all this stuff that doesn't make any sense, you know, intuitively or logically even. But yeah, I think a lot of traumatized men wrote the Bible.
Yeah.
You know?
Totally. Yeah.
And they didn't have any healing. They just were like probably abused in different ways. Like think about, parenting strategies have changed a lot throughout the years, but you know, just, I don't know. There's just, I just feel like so much unhealed trauma was like written in. So let's help people behave the specific way because this is what God wants.
Yeah.
Just
also
out
extremely
of
controlling, control people. Like, it's like traumatized men wrote the Bible, like unresolved traumatized men wrote the Bible, and unresolved traumatized men run the church.
Oh, totally.
Right.
Yeah.
And it attracts a lot of traumatized people.
It is just scattered in the Catholic Church, right? With all of the child abuse and child sexual abuse scattered throughout Christianity.
Yeah.
And like, it's so not hard to see.
Yeah.
It's so easy to see. What I think was also interesting is talking about Julia's and like our most recent podcast that's out now, which isn't actually out because we're filming this before it comes out, was with
Nick,
the ex-Calvary Chapel pastor, Nick Valentino.
I've been wanting to see that. Yeah.
Which, thank you, Nick. We love you.
Comes out on Friday.
Awesome. What was fascinating was interviewing Julia and her experience as like a potential pastor's wife going to Marietta.
Yeah.
And then right after that, interviewing an ex-Calvary Chapel pastor who went to Marietta.
No way.
Who was like a man, a white guy.
Oh my gosh.
And his experience, there's like a lot of correlation in very like mirrored way. Like, I don't know, like it's really interesting.
Wow. Interesting.
And it's how this culture, this religion, like trains men to hold that, you know, nature into like life or whatever. Like, no, women are like this. I'm going to put them on a pedestal.
Yeah.
And like women being forced to work under their, you know, like all this and how his experience in that was just fascinating.
Yeah.
It just is on every level.
Yeah.
The religion kind of embeds a really traumatic approach to being human.
Yeah.
Just so much. And then, then you just find yourself leading in it like how you did. I was a leader in it.
Yeah.
Given I walked away at like 16, 15, so I was young, but I was praying at the pole, you know, like I was president of the Christian club. I was bringing my Bible. I was telling friends that they need a savior, all of this. And like,
me too.
Wow. But I became that leader because my dad was a leader and women weren't going to be, my sister wasn't like that wasn't something she was ever going to think about doing. I was just like, I just followed the track perfectly.
Yeah.
Like, you know, it was just, wow.
Was that the same for you, Zach, or?
We had a really different experience because Natalie moved away when I was really young because she got married.
Oh, yeah.
And then they moved, and that allowed them to separate themselves from the church and then deconstruct without the parents knowing.
Yeah.
Super safe.
Wow.
Nate got kicked out when I was 15 and he was just turned 18. And that just put me alone in the house. And so I was like hyper coddled by my parents after that. And then was dealing with a lot of anxiety and panic. And so I couldn't really started thinking for myself, I would say into my mid-20s.
Wow. Okay.
And so it took me a while. I stopped really living by the word of God at like 19.
Oh, yeah.
Like senior year of high school, started to kind of like party more and want more friends that weren't Christian, which is like so frowned upon in the church.
Yeah.
But then I just stopped identifying as a Christian, but not really talking about it.
Yeah.
And then it wasn't, I moved to New Orleans for a little bit and got away. I think that's a huge thing.
Yeah.
Is separating yourself from the space.
Totally.
And then started to just think about it and be curious.
Yeah.
Like your big advice in your podcast was just be curious. It's like, dude, that was it for me. Just being curious. Where does the Bible come from?
Yeah.
Where is this like doctrine that's ingrained in me? Where does it really come from? And like you said, it comes from oppressed white men.
Yeah.
And who says it wasn't changed, multiple times throughout history?
Yeah. It was.
Yeah, exactly. And things were added. And like when you go through the history texts of it, it's like the real important parts that we run our lives off were added.
Yeah.
It wasn't spoken,
Yeah.
But then, so I started questioning, but it was later in my 20s. It wasn't, Nate was like young. He professed to our parents at like 15 that he wasn't going to Christian anymore. I couldn't say those words until about 26. Yeah. Until like 5 years ago.
Wow. Okay.
That like I wasn't a Christian to my parents. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So it took me longer, but I think mentally I let go of it younger.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. And, I just want to comment on how brave you guys are,
Oh, thank you.
Like, seriously. Yeah. I mean, that takes so much courage.
Yeah. It's taken a long time. Where we're at now, having all these interviews is really showing us what we're doing.
Yeah.
When we were just doing it alone.
Yeah.
We had one interview, Austin. I would love to reconnect with him, but it's like episode 17. It was our first interview.
Wow.
But other than that, like we didn't bring anyone else in.
Oh, wow.
And since we've started bringing people in, we're starting to cause a little bit of a rush. We're like rustling some things up.
I know. That's good.
And I think it's really good that we've waited this long because we've gotten really strong in it in ourselves. And we've experienced a lot of healing just with ourselves. That awesome. Now that we're here, we're like, no, we really believe in what we're doing.
Yeah.
And we think it's really special. And so now the words aren't as powerful against us. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Thanks for saying that though, because it is pretty terrifying sometimes.
Well, yeah. I mean, and I say that to anyone that leaves, and finds their own way. Like, I mean, definitely to you guys and the situation with your dad as a pastor and all of that, just how much courage that took to choose your own path. But yeah, also I'd just say that to the listeners too, and anyone that's willing to consider leaving, like that is really one of the most scary and rebellious acts you could imagine. But it's such an act of courage and just like self-alignment. Like I'm going to put my whole eternity on the line to do what's right for me.
Yeah. To follow that intuition.
That is just so brave. Yeah. So brave. And it might be the start of a whole lot of healing and process and everything, but just, I admire, like, how the hell did we do that? You know?
Well, I would say you did it too.
I know.
You did it later in life.
Yeah.
Like so much more brain development got concreted in it. And then you still came out of it. And so like, I applaud that like crazy.
Yeah.
Like you said, how did we do that? I think that one of I've come in my healing, I've come to learn how to be actually a lot more thankful to my father.
Oh, yeah.
The one that I used to blame for all of my trauma.
Yeah.
Who now I blame very little. Right.
Wow,
as I've healed, which is really, really nice and freeing.
I bet.
Even in the midst of this podcast, I have a better relationship with my parents. It's very, very, very minimal, but it's safer and healthier than it's ever been.
Yeah.
How did I break free, or what it was like? I'm thankful for my father. He raised, my brother too and my sister, but like for me, my experience was like, he really raised me to be like, hey, you need to be extremely careful in this world. Anybody that tells you to believe something, be critical minded. So when it came to an age where I was like, so I'm going to be really critical about what you're telling me to believe. It was like he trained me to do just that. And when I was like 15, 16, we were like arguing all the time. He'd be like, I can't believe you're just falling away. And I'd be like, you legit taught me to do this.
Yeah.
To question the things that I feel.
Wow.
Like, and not only that, but to bring alarm to it.
Yeah.
And to bring words to it.
And then also to speak loudly against it.
Speak loudly.
Wow.
And so like we had a father and a mother that like, mostly our dad, that really kind of embraced that. And that's what he lived by, and he found Christianity.
Interesting, yeah.
And then I also like think that, how did I make it out, or how did I find And that's like one of my best friends still to this day. We rarely talk, but like I had a friend that was like a diehard Christian who was like on his knees praying. He was such an amazing intellectual person who we kind of found cannabis together. And I was so scared of anything outside of the Bible, of anything.
Oh, I bet.
And he wasn't raised in a family that was confrontational. But we were so close that like his upbringing gave him the space that I needed as his best friend to allow me to be this sort of overly emotional, chaotic like person that was so scared of everything outside of the church. And he was just this friend that was like, hey, I just read something that's really interesting. Let's talk about it tonight over a joint. And I'd be like, that's like when I finally like was okay with weed and really like enjoying weed. We would smoke and he would just like tell me these thoughts he was having that were like really intellectual. And I was like really scared to hear them.
Yeah.
But then it would be like,
while your fundamentalist brain is becoming neuroplastic.
Exactly.
Yeah. Oh, nice.
And so like how did we make it out? Like how, whatever like is, I didn't do it alone. Is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
Like it feels lonely.
Yeah.
Totally. Getting out of the church, you feel really lonely. And then when you start to deconstruct, you feel less lonely, right? You can live out of the church for years and never deconstruct.
Yeah.
Right. And so like my deconstruction started as a diehard believer with cannabis and a best friend who we would go and do like hikes and we would look at trees and be like, how is this Christian? You know, like how is this tree Christian? And so that's like, I was just going to answer that question and say that. That's like, I give a lot of thanks to not being alone. Like having a support system.
I was going to say that. I like that. I like that you said that you didn't do it alone. Because it does, like you said, it does feel like you're doing it alone because it's all internal. Yeah. And it's all like letting go of your own fundamentalist beliefs. But to just have that friend, like I'm so thankful I had my brother and my sister to be like, you're okay to think yourself. You know, if I didn't have that, I still think I would have found it. Yeah. But it would have been more challenging for sure.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's a great point.
Wow.
Yeah.
This has been amazing.
Yeah, it's been great.
I know.
This actually went to be here. Really perfect. If you think about it.
Yeah, it did.
Anything else that's, I got to say that the acronym we came up with after your interview the last time, you know, I know masculinity and toxic masculinity and all that, but we came up with COC.
Yeah.
Compassion, openness, curiosity, and kindness.
Yeah.
And I think courage was like another one that you just said. Clarity. Yeah. It's a lot of C's that you could.
Totally.
But that's kind of the name of the game, right? That's like where it starts and ends is having compassion, openness, curiosity, and kindness, and never letting that sway. It's like that's a huge part of growth and healing.
Yeah. Totally.
And being that to yourself.
Yeah. It's, you know, it's a great way to like reorient towards yourself, you know, like to me, that's one of the most valuable things about healing is learning to love yourself deeply in the ways that you need, you know, learning to really care about your feelings, make time, you know, to connect with them, make time to connect, take care of your body, you know, take care of your relationships, you know, and start to tune into what you want and need and actually make time to prioritize those, like prioritize pleasure, prioritize even just letting yourself have an imagination about what you could do with your life, you know? Like some of these things that you're in survival mode, you don't get a chance to do. And so, I just think there's so much like us returning to ourselves. Oh, there's another great book, IFS book, is called You Are the One You've Been Waiting For.
Cool.
You know, so talk about being your own savior.
Yeah.
You know?
Wow. Yeah.
Like that's where it's at. You know, we can save ourselves. We can heal ourselves. It's amazing how we, like ourself does know how to heal, and we can learn to trust that and follow that and get free.
Wow.
So
I love it.
It's pretty awesome. Yeah.
You're accepting clients right now?
Yeah,
California.
Definitely.
Is that something you want to share in this podcast or offer that to our listeners? Or
oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, I have openings for sure. And
is it forestbenedict.com?
Yeah, that's my website.
Forestbenedict.com.
We'll put it in the description too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah.
Anything else on your mind or heart or that little internal silent voice.
What's on your heart today? Yeah. That's so Christian.
Seriously. Yeah, exactly.
Sometimes it's impossible. It's
everything, dude.
Interviewing Nick was hilarious because we kept busting up that like, it's kind of impossible sometimes to not sound like a pastor when you've been a pastor.
Yeah.
You know, it's like,
totally.
It's like, it takes a while to like maybe like have a different style of,
or it's just impossible.
Yeah, I can tell if somebody's been a pastor or in ministry. I was like, oh.
Yeah, exactly.
It's the language.
It is.
But yeah, no, I do want to mention this. So, after last interview, I was just like, watched it, and was so excited for this and what you guys are doing, and I just, I don't know. I just want you guys to know what you're doing is really profound. It is excellent. It is like really making a difference and will continue to. And I am a super fan, like it feels, I shared that with like that interview with like everybody, religious trauma therapists I know, friends, family, even Christians. Reconnected with some of the guys from the band, like just felt like sharing it with so many people. And it wasn't just because it was my story, but, I really, just want to affirm what you guys are doing. I really believe in what you guys are doing. And I think you bring so much like heart to this show and podcast. And you're incredibly talented, so. And that might be labeled as perfectionism. And there may be some of that in there still, but it is also like really excellent. And so I guess I just want you to know, man, this religious word's coming to my head, but it's like giving my blessing in a sense, It's just like what you guys are doing is awesome here. I just love being a part of it and just reconnecting with you guys,
Totally.
So anyways, I do want to make sure I say that.
Yeah, thank you.
That's very sweet.
Yeah. I appreciate hearing that.
Yeah. And I can't let you just say that without me saying that I'm very appreciative of how, in such a, really, if you think about it, a short amount of time, you have transformed your life as a Christian therapist into an IFS religious trauma therapist.
Yeah.
Because I know the work you're doing for yourself continuously and how that translates to your clients and how what you've shown here on this podcast is excellent.
Yeah, thank you.
And I can feel that I can feel it in your body, your aura, your energies just exudes it. You are, when you walked into this podcast, you came in vulnerably. We had a conversation about things you're working through.
Yeah.
Which means like, as we heal, we have trauma that we're healing consistent. And you're just so honest about it. And you can feel that. And so you feel very safe.
Yeah.
And so if anyone's watching this right now and you're curious of how to approach IFS or whatever, definitely hit up Forest.
Yeah.
Talk about safe and softness. This is the person that will help you facilitate that. So you exude that. Awesome. So I'm very thankful for you.
Thank you.
Coming on our podcast twice and providing your personal story and then providing this sort of practice that you've been doing a long time. I'm very appreciative.
Thank you. I appreciate you saying that.
And I'm sure we'll have you on in the future again sometime.
Yeah, I hope so.
You've helped us. Just your interview alone, we've booked a handful of interviews off people reaching out to us.
Oh, so awesome.
And so shit's getting busy.
Yeah.
All right, when
but
you're about to go to the forest.
Yeah, exactly. We're just
forest.
We're so happy to have you in our wing, like in our corner, and like our
totally.
It really does feel like a support system around deconstructing religious trauma and how that looks is forming.
Yeah.
And that's really fucking cool.
Yeah.
So
that's awesome.
Thank you for that.
It's gonna be
totally.
Anything else, Zachary?
No.
Well, folks, thank you so much for listening to episode 70 of the Moral Combat Podcast. This has been Forest Benedict. My name is Nathaniel.
I'm Zach.
And we will see you next time. Another interview. They just keep coming.
It's
going to be a goodie.
It is.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.